spoken yet.
Welcome to the Sports Business Take Podcast, your home for sports industry news with a little personality. I'm Paul Hine. He is Zach Creekmore. And today we are joined by a very special guest, Eric Bechtel of IdeaQuest, CEO and founder of IdeaQuest. So, Eric, I wanted to ask you, the first thing I want to ask you is, what was it like being an entrepreneur, starting IdeaQuest on your own, and seeing it grow into the company that it is today, having done $3.2 billion in sponsorship?
I never looked at myself as an entrepreneur. I grew up in Cleveland originally, and I just loved sports as a kid. And I don't know how I fell into it, but I had a lot of people who helped me along the way on my journey. And my goal was to work in sports. I didn't know what that meant, but I still can't answer the question. What do I want to do when I grow up? Uh, but as I've told my own children, that if you are passionate about something, whatever that thing is, and you can somehow make a career or a living out of it, you'll never work a day in your life. And so, as a young kid growing up in Cleveland, in the dog pound, with my father and my brothers, and following all the teams and just loving sports, and playing every sport I could possibly play, as a young kid, and then into high school. And fortunately for me, I was able to play football in college. I was like, man, if I could figure how I could make a living working in sports, that would be awesome. So, uh, you know, uh, my journey's an interesting one. When I was done playing, I played football at UConn. I wanted, my childhood dream, like a lot of kids, is to play. I wanted to play in the NFL, play professional sports. Wasn't good enough to do it, but I was fortunate enough to have Brent Musburger as a neighbor, who was then at CBS Sports. And I'm a lot older. I could be your guy's father. So, back then ESPN really wasn't around, and, there weren't a lot of, sports channels. Uh, and I told him, I knocked on his door. His sons were younger than me in high school, but he kind of followed my career to UConn, and I was always friendly with his sons. And I just asked him for advice. I said, I don't want to be a sports broadcaster, but I'd like to work in sports, and I don't know what it means. Do you have any advice or suggestions for me? He was on his way to do the Cotton Bowl down in Dallas, and then do a playoff game in New Orleans. And he said, look, when I get back, let's go out to lunch. And when he came back from that trip, when he went down to Dallas, he was met by his family at the gate by a college student who was holding a Musburger family sign. And that person was a gentleman by the name of Elliot Hill, who was then at Ohio University going through their sports management program. And this is, I'm going to go late 80s for you guys. And there weren't a lot of colleges that had not only undergrad, there were no undergrad degrees in sports management, and there were probably a half a dozen that had graduate. Ohio University was actually the first university to offer a master's in sports management. And long story short, he connected me with Elliot. He said, go visit Elliot out at Ohio University. What was cool for me is my parents met at Ohio University, which was neat for me to be able to go to the school where they met. I spent a weekend with Elliot. Fast forward, got a couple letter of recommendations, was fortunate enough to get into the program. And that got me my break, to get into sports. So, that was kind of cool. Elliot Hill, by the way, used to be the president of Nike, spent his whole career at Nike.
Wow.
And is just a great guy. And he was kind enough to host me. And it's kind of what that program was all about paying it forward, getting people into the industry. And, back in the late 80s, the industry isn't even close to what it is today, as you can imagine. There weren't that many people working. The reason why James Mason was Peter O'Malley's best friend, who owned the Dodgers, and he said, "Look, I'm putting all these athletes that are retiring into my front office, but they don't know the business of sports. Could you start a master's program? And that's kind of, this is, the early days of IMG with Mark McCormick and Donald Dell and ProServe, and there weren't a lot of agencies around, kind of the business of sports. So by luck, I kind of got into the industry at the right time. And, 30 years later, I've had an amazing journey. I worked for Vince McMahon out of grad school at the old WWF, which brought me back to Connecticut. After having 5 years there, during the rise of pay per view and growing that product internationally, I was able to get on the ground floor of a startup sports marketing agency called Integrated Sports International. And we started in the early '90s, and one of my partners was Frank Vuno, who was running NFL properties at the time for Commissioner Tagliabue. And I went to interview with Frank because I had a family friend who said, "Hey, you want to go work in the NFL or at the league or with the team? You should go meet with Frank." And long story short, he was on his way out to go start an agency, and he loved my background, having worked for Vince and doing pay-per-view and sponsorship and media. And he's like, why don't you come join us? And so as a pretty young guy, with 5 years experience, I got in the ground floor of an agency, and it was a rocket ship in the '90s. We were very early to the business of, selling naming rights. I landed Burger King as our first big corporate consulting client, which ended up being a client of mine for 15 years, which opened a lot of doors for me in the industry. And we ended up selling that business in 1999. There was a gentleman, Bob Sillerman, who had basically monopolized the concert business. He bought up all the regional concert promoters, then he bought all the amphitheaters, and he needed the sports element of agents and athletes and sports marketing because he wanted to take the company public. So he bought David Falk's firm, Fame, and was his first acquisition. And one of my partners at ISI had worked with David at ProServe before he left to go to build Fame, which he had Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing and a bunch of great basketball players. And so we became the second acquisition. And over the period of about a year, Bob Sillerman bought about 17 agencies, and we had created the SFX Sports Group, which was kind of the precursor to CAA Sports and Endeavor, William Morris, and all the big agencies that you see today. And what we didn't know was he ended up packaging the whole thing and selling it back to Clear Channel, for about $4 billion. So all of a sudden, this vision of building this, main agency that was going to go take over the industry world globally kind of went out the window. So this is about 2001, and I just said, you know what? I was pretty young. I just gotten married, just had my first child. I said that was pretty easy, made some money. Why don't I go do this again? And I ended up, founding IdeaQuest. So I wouldn't say I was an entrepreneur per se, but there aren't a lot of agencies that are independently owned that have been in the industry for now 23 years for us, which I'm really proud of. And I just figured, you know what? I love what I'm doing. And if I were to take my advice that I give my kids, I don't get, I get paid to do this. I don't feel like I'm working. So, just very lucky.
That's awesome to hear about how your connections really led to your success in the industry and the founding of IdeaQuest. That's really, really cool.
Thanks.
Amazing journey.
Yeah, I totally
And a
agree with
lot of fun along the way too.
Paul. Absolutely, I can tell. I can feel your energy and the emotion you have behind the stories you're sharing. So thank you. We look forward to hearing more about it as we go throughout our interview. You talked about your journey coming through, the connections you had, the powerful people that you were able to connect with, and the importance of that. Um, Founding IdeaQuest, you work with businesses now, talking about business development, brand development, when working and supporting companies in business, In brand development, what would you describe as the number one strategy or focus for a business looking to grow? How did you handle this as IdeaQuest grew?
Oh, it's a great question. So it's a pretty simple answer in our world. So at IdeaQuest, we don't say we're a sports marketing agency. We say we're a marketing and sales solutions agency. And our sole job for our clients is to help them grow sales and market share. And so, that's the mission. That's it. And as long as you're doing that and you're doing great work, they'll keep you around. And we pride ourselves on the fact that our longest standing client, American Family Insurance, we've been working with for 15 years. But at the same time, we also have worked with Fortune 70 companies like Johnson Controls out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is in the building solution space. And it's really driven by that premise, from a strategic standpoint. Marketing is sales, sales is marketing. And our whole job with IdeaQuest is coming up with the big ideas that can help our clients win. So everyone always says, "Hey, how did you come up with the name IdeaQuest?" As a sales guy, I always used to say, if you walked into the boardroom with the biggest idea, 99% of the time when they're getting pitched a bunch of different things, the big idea is the one they're going to, move towards and do. So for me, it was always searching for that big idea. So the quest for the big idea, and then obviously IQ, is as the initials. It's kind of like, hey, we're smart, select intelligently, hire us, we'll help you win. So, but when you go through that process of ideation and strategy, the one thing that has never changed in my entire career is authenticity and having brand alignment. And I could give you a couple examples along the way of my career. I was fortunate enough to work with Steve Young, San Francisco 49ers Hall of Fame quarterback, and do all of his off the field marketing. Steve was Mormon, and he didn't, drink caffeine. He didn't drink alcohol. It was really important to him and his family. And, after he won Super Bowl 29, one of the iconic, endorsement deals we did with him was with the Milk Mustache campaign. And I don't know how much you guys know about that campaign, but there was never, now it as every celebrity under the sun does that campaign. But back then, they had only used models. It was started, in the fashion industry. And they had never even thought of using a male, and they never even thought of a sports or entertainer. And, given the authenticity of the story of Steve throwing 6 touchdown passes, being Super Bowl MVP, being Mormon, we put him in the first Milk Mustache campaign, which was really cool, but it was authentic. So when we pitched it to Milk, of course they're going to say yes. We more recently have done a campaign that you guys probably see with Shaquille O'Neal and the General Insurance. You see the ads on ESPN all the time. But the way that deal came together is truly an authentic story. When Shaquille was at LSU, he was given a truck, pre-NIL days, I would say. And so he called his dad because he was really excited. He said, "Hey, Dad, someone just gave me this brand new Ford truck. I'm really excited." His dad said, "You better not drive it until you have insurance." And his dad was a former military, and Shaquille said to his dad, "What's insurance?" He goes, "You're a smart man. You better figure it out." And so he saw the commercials on TV of the little general dude driving the red Corvette, because he used to watch a lot of daytime soap, shows. And so he called the 800 number. He got a policy, and that's how he found out what insurance was. And so
Wow.
when we were able to share that story, with the chairman and CEO of the General and American Family Insurance, it became a no-brainer, to create that partnership. And it's it's true to who he is. It's authentic. It's authentic to who the general is, in terms of how they try to help, customers, who are struggling, and give them a break. And it's been an awesome, platform and partnership. And then, another one, we work with a company called Bold Penguin out of, Columbus, Ohio, and they were at one point looking at potentially doing, something in the state of Ohio near Columbus. We were talking to the Columbus crew, because they were building a new stadium for the MLS team. Long story short, the deal didn't happen, but we found out that the NHL had approved, teams, giving them the rights to sell, real estate on the helmets. And so of course the Pittsburgh Penguins, had an opportunity. Their colors are black and gold. Bold Penguins colors are black and gold, and their logo is a penguin, and they're called Bold Penguin. It didn't take too long, to
Easy connection there.
make a couple, because it was authentic, it was synergistic, and those are the best deals. The ones where, hey, there's such complete brand alignment. So to me, it always comes down to being authentic and be able to reach those consumers where they are. Go to them, and create that synergy. And I think that helps drive, sales and market share.
That makes total sense. We heard you talk a lot about being authentic. Do you think that's the most effective marketing strategy that you've implemented for companies, is just the authenticity and that brand alignment? Do you think that's the most effective way to market a company?
I wouldn't say it's the most effective way. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways to reach consumers. Ultimately, you have to know who your audience is, and then you got to find out what the best vehicle is to reach them where they are. And in today's day and age, with all this technology and social media and the short attention spans, and Super Bowl spots costing $7 million for a 30-second, commercial, it gets harder and harder, and attention spans. So, but I think when you figure out what the right vehicle is, if you have that authentic message, I think you're going to win, 9 times out of 10.
That makes total sense.
Well said. I love what you said about having it be the right vehicle, because it really is. Do you identify your audience? Are you able to create an authentic relationship and build it and send it to them in the way that they're going to receive it best and comprehend it? So super powerful there. With IdeaQuest being founded in 2001, we have seen a revolution of technology throughout, whether it be from going from the flip phone to the iPhone, or the most recent with the Apple goggles. There, it's past my mind, but the
Apple
Vision Pro, right? So many technological changes, right? With the revolution and development of tech, how has and how will your company continue to innovate and transform with our ever-changing world?
So I was fortunate, being small when I started in 2001, when you're building, a business from the ground up, that I had a couple mentors who, said, hey, listen, you need to look at, media, healthcare, technology, like where's the wind blowing? And if you could find opportunities. And one of the companies that I got involved with as an investor was a company called Exos Technologies, after we sold ISI and I was starting IdeaQuest. And Exos was known at the time for doing all the hardware and software that colleges and professional teams were using to film games and practices. And there became an arms race in college football with building out facilities. And so I was able to get in early with Exos and really help them, almost get about 95% market share. And I just saw, how technology could help people, because when I played football in college, the head coach had to wait until like midnight after the game, and the film guy would show up with the film and he'd put it in the projector and it was like click, 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 click. Well, guess what? 30 plus years later, now it's instantaneous. They could actually have iPads on the sidelines, so to your point, for me, technology is always what's next, because you have no idea what's coming. Now it's AI, everything's AI, AI, AI. Whereas, people weren't really talking about the AI, 5, 6 years ago, even though it was in development, but now it's here. When you look at, you know, professional sports and the live viewership and how important that is, streaming, how can you stream the stuff better? There's more options, there's more availability. There's second and third screen experiences now. We're working with a company, called Headvantage, which was founded by, an Air Force fighter jet pilot, because they had eye tracing technology when he was flying missions to see, hey, where were your eyes when you were, making that maneuver or dropping that bomb? And he's like, why aren't we doing this in professional sports? Right. And, pretty soon in the not too distant future, you're going to be able to tune into Monday Night Football and say, all right, I want to watch Pat Mahomes' helmet cam and see what he's looking at. And they're going to be able to embed technology into that stream from DraftKings, because they know you ordered his helmet and not Travis Kelce's. And they could serve you up a prop bet saying, hey, do you think Mahomes is going to, run or pass, or, is he going to look off and check down, on the Mike linebacker? It's crazy where this is going. And your point about Apple Vision Pro, literally being immersed in the game, because if you're sitting at your house, how cool would it be? Like, I wouldn't do it, I'm too old, but like, I'm sitting on my couch where I want to watch a game, but I could put that on for 30 minutes and be sitting courtside at the Knicks game with Spike Lee, and you're having that experience. So, for me, going back to, when I founded the company, I met a lot of great tech people, a lot of entrepreneurs, and, where I was able to help them is through my network in the sports industry and entertainment industry. And one entrepreneur had told me, hey, I got the greatest technology ever developed, but right now it's just sitting up there on that shelf collecting dust. And unless I can get, teams and leagues and networks to buy it, it's worthless, but it's amazing. So, technology is fundamentally changing every industry in the world every day in real time. So it's not going anywhere. I know my kids are a lot smarter than me. My one son's doing computer science at Stephen College. It's crazy, to even think. Like, I think back, if my grandparents were alive, what would they think about this thing, right? Because
Yeah.
when I was your guys' age, these didn't exist when I was in college. And I can't even imagine how we used to do business, right? And because in today's world, I mean, I don't even want to bore you guys with how fundamentally different it is. And it's just advancing every single business. And you got to pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear about how you think AI is going to carry us into the future and how technology has developed throughout your time at IdeaQuest. We've talked a lot about the deals that you've done with certain companies, Steve Young, the Milk Mustache, and the General Insurance. What do you think is the hardest deal that IdeaQuest has negotiated, and why? What roadblocks did you hit, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I can't say it was IdeaQuest. I'm going to go back to my ISI days, because it was a very unique deal. But, if you remember, the 49ers used to play at Candlestick Park. And there was a time where that was changed early on in the naming rights industry to 3Com Park. And so we represented the 49ers as well as Steve Young. And Eddie DeBartolo and Carmen Policy came to us and said, look, we want to do a naming rights deal. It's a little complicated because both the 49ers and the San Francisco Giants used to play in Candlestick. So neither team owned the venue. There was a stadium authority that controlled signage, and then there was the city of San Francisco. So there were four major, basically partners and owners. And the 49ers, because they were very progressive at the time, which is why Eddie DePartlo's in the Hall of Fame, really wanted to do a naming rights deal. When we found 3Com, they were a technology company in the middle of Silicon Valley that nobody knew anything about. And the reason why they ultimately ended up doing the deal is because they wanted to put their name on the map, because they were trying to recruit the best talent in Silicon Valley to come work for them as a technology company. And so, but no one knew who they were, and they weren't the sexy name, so they were missing out on a lot of people. But long story short, it was very political, because there were a lot of hands in the pot, and there were a lot of
moving
different
parts.
lot of moving parts. And naming rights are complicated deals, to get done, to begin with, normally because they're big. But if you go back to then in the mid 90s, there weren't a lot of naming rights being done back then, so we were kind of early pioneers to helping sell stadium naming rights. And ultimately it was so controversial that on Monday Night Football, when we unveiled it, the broadcasters were not going to refer to it. They were going to refer to it as Candlestick Park.
Wow.
And we literally had to get people involved at the highest levels of the NFL and ABC Sports, without divulging names, to make sure that the broadcasters said, hey, and there were multiple NFL owners who were on the broadcast committee, to make sure, hey, you're going to call this 3Com Park, and here's why.
Wow.
And if you were someone living in San Francisco or a 49ers fan back then, that was kind of blasphemy that the name Candlestick Park was going to be removed. Fast forward, the deal was a home run for all the teams involved. It was a home run for 3Com Park. And ultimately, which became even more controversial, the 49ers built Levi Stadium, and they moved down to Santa Clara. So they moved out of the city. So it was a pretty complicated deal, but one that worked at the time, and just had a lot of moving pieces. And I will tell you both, having done over a dozen naming rights deals on both the buy and sell side during my career, I've never been in the room when the deal's closed, because at the end of the day, those type of deals get done between the owner of the team and the chairman and CEO of the company. Because there's a lot of people who get involved when you're negotiating those deals, because they're big, they're complex. But when the pen goes to paper, it's the top to top meeting that ultimately, solidifies those deals. So, but that was a fun one.
Definitely really interesting to hear about some complicated roadblocks in that one, and really interesting that you guys got to experience that and get that done.
Yeah,
we had a great team and great partners working on it. It takes a lot. It's never one single person. We had a great owner who had a big vision, and a lot of people that played their part in it. As you can imagine, when you're dealing with, city and state governments, stadium authorities, and then a whole nother professional sports franchise, that wants to get their piece too. So it was a very interesting deal.
Yeah, amazing, awesome to see a theme throughout all of this. Whether it's technology, whether it's your marketing, whether it's the branding piece of it, you're talking so much about early adoption and how being able to be in that early door and get there quickly, while at the same time being intelligent about it and the intelligent decision you make, being an innovator, has been such a difference maker for you. So love to hear that and love to see it, because it's so true, especially when you're entering the sports business world today, right? Finding that spot where you can be an innovator is where you're going to find your success.
Absolutely.
You talked a little bit earlier about what you did before founding IdeaQuest. You just talked about your work with another company. I'm curious to see, what was the experience like? How did it influence your development? What did it do to find who you are in your role today? And kind of what was your experience before you went and founded your company? What's a great story that you want to share?
Well, I'll tell you, I mentioned it earlier. I couldn't have had a better opportunity than going to work at the WWF, uh, aka Titan Sports Inc., which was the parent company name back in the day, and working for someone like Vince McMahon, who was a true visionary. He taught me a lot. He was at the forefront of taking what was a regional business, and consolidating it into a national company. But his whole vision was to always go global. So to see it now where, it's TKO and they've merged with the UFC, and to be in on the early years, because I really believe in 1988 when I went there that Vince had that global vision already for what ultimately was accomplished. There's no doubt in my mind that that's where he was always going to build this business. So to be able to work for a visionary like that and get in on the ground floor. The reason why it was such a great first job for me out of grad school was because I got exposed to live event marketing, media sales, sponsorship sales, promotion and ticketing, merchandising, publishing. And, back then, pay-per-view was in its infancy. It isn't what it is today. When I was playing football at college, I went to watch the first couple WrestleManias on the Jumbotron at the Hartford Civic Center. That was the early, incubator for pay per view. And literally, Vince was selling out stadiums and arenas around the country so people could go watch WrestleMania 1, which was at Madison Square Garden that only had 20,000 people, but he's selling it to millions of people that would literally go watch it. And that was kind of the early days of pay-per-view. But what was cool is, when pay-per-view did come along, there was no, hey, these are the rules and this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. We're the broadcaster. We're broadcasting the event and it's being distributed out. So from a sales perspective, we got to be really creative. And one of the very first deals that I ever did in this industry that I'm really proud of is we got Domino's Pizza to sponsor the very first SummerSlam, which was in Philadelphia at the old Spectrum. And it was the first time there was ever a corporate sponsorship deal aligned to a pay-per-view event. And the way we did that is we used to pre-tape the television. It wasn't like today where they do Monday Night Raw and it's live every week. We used to actually pre-tape the shows. And so, and I'll never forget what arena we were in, but I was trying to close this deal with Domino's and their media agency in New York City. And we were at one of our TV tapings. And I basically was in the pre-production meeting, telling Vince, what can we do to go, to get Domino's some exposure so we could show them what we could do in this pay-per-view event. Long story short, he's like, go to the local Domino's and order a bunch of pizzas and have the guys come in their uniforms. And he goes, just get them here, and we'll figure it out. So I go literally down the street, get a bunch of pies, get two guys in their uniforms. They come to the arena. And Vince literally sent them to ringside with the pizzas dressed up. They get Bobby Heenan's announcing, he opens up the pizza. He starts talking about Domino's in the middle of the TV taping. And then the fans they're handing out slices. And we took that clip, took it to the media agency, done deal. So that was, cool stuff back then. We were making it up.
That's a wild story.
But we were making it up on the fly. And, now today I mentioned Burger King and I wasn't working with them at the time. But I forget I think Floyd Mayweather's last fight, the Burger King actually walked him to the ring, as part of a sponsorship deal so it was kind of a neat thing to see that, but it that was pretty cool. And being able to work for a visionary in a company like that, where we could get as creative as we dreamed and make stuff happen. And Vince was always of the mindset, hey, if you got $5 in your pocket, spend 10. Bet on yourself. If you can, generate revenue, you can kind of, take your career wherever you want it to go. So that was just a great place, and a great opportunity for me. So I kind of fell into it. I got lucky.
That's awesome. I love what you said about bet on yourself. We talk about that a lot on here, where it's you really have to believe in yourself in order to be able to succeed in this industry. And it was really interesting to hear about how you got your start at WWF, and being in those different areas, merchandising, ticket sales, media, helped you get to where you are today. We don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'll just ask you one last question. We ask the same closing question to all of our guests. If you could go back to any moment in sports history and be involved with the event that is going on in your mind, which event would it be and why?
So I'm going to comment on your last comment, which is, if you're going to push all your poker chips in, who are you gonna push them in on, right? I'm gonna push them in on me, no matter what it takes. So to believe in yourself. But if you're sitting at that table and you got to push them all in, I'm gonna bet on myself. So Paul, I couldn't agree more with that. But to answer your last question, I actually lived it, so I don't need to go back. I shared with you,
Okay.
my dream was to play in the NFL. I shared with you that I represented Steve Young, for his off-field marketing, early in my career. I was at Super Bowl 29 when he threw the 6 touchdown passes.
Wow.
I was in his room the night before the game. He told me what the first play of the game was going to be, and he said, "I'm going to hit Jerry Rice on a post for 80 yards," and he did, which was
Wow.
cool after the fact. But
That's
that
awesome.
game, one of the coolest aspects, and you talk about your life coming full circle. Uh, that game was on CBS Sports. Brent Musburger was broadcasting the game, and I'm in the locker room after the game. We had the Carl Pascarella, the CEO of Visa at the time, who we were talking about doing a big deal with the 49ers and Steve Young, which we ultimately did. And I'm in the locker room, and the team comes in, they close the doors, they get on a knee, they say the Lord's Prayer. Brent Musburger gets up there, hands Steve Young the MVP trophy, the whole thing. And I'm like, that's the guy that got me in the business. This is my client. My dream was always to play in the NFL, which I didn't make it. I failed on that dream. But somehow, Steve Young played high school football in Connecticut, so did I. So I'm sitting there going, this is like a surreal moment, and I actually know what it's like to win a Super Bowl and be in the locker room of a winning team. And, for me, I don't think it could get any better than that. I called my mom,
How
and
could
I
you get
was
any
like,
better than that?
I called my mom, and I was like, I was almost in tears. I was like, hey, Mom, I know I didn't make it to the NFL, but I now
But it
know
feels
what
like
it's
it.
like. I know what it's like to win a Super Bowl and be in the locker room, and to have the guy who got me started in this business, Brent Musburger, be there in the locker room on that broadcast was pretty cool. And that's why I always say to everybody, I'm a big believer in paying it forward. I never thought I'd go to own my own companies and be a partner and sell one and start another one, and be in this industry and have the experiences and the relationships and the people that I've worked with, whether it's CEOs or whether it's athletes that I've done deals with, um, events that I've gone to. I wouldn't be here on this podcast right now with you guys if Brent Musburger didn't help me. And so
Wow.
you never know what one person's generosity or favor can do. And at the time, I'm a 21-year-old kid getting ready to graduate from UConn, have no idea what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it, and to have that come kind of full circle. So for me, it's always been, no matter who I hire, no matter who calls me. We all have only so many hours in the day, but if there's anything I can do to give advice or come on a podcast like this or help someone out with a recommendation, I'm going to do it, because I never want to forget where I came from. I wouldn't have been living the dream. And ironically, I tell my 3 kids they don't want anything to do with what dad does, and that's okay, because they are all following their passion, and they're all going to be really happy, and they're never going to work a day in their life, because if you can do that, and I've lived it. So that would be my event. That was like and I can tell you, I've had some amazing, I was in victory lane with Dale Earnhardt when he finally won the Daytona 500.
Wow.
I worked very closely with him. I ended up, after he passed away, they became one of my founding clients, because his widow, Teresa, wanted some help building out the sales and marketing infrastructure for the race team. I'll send you guys a little email as we celebrated our 23rd birthday that you'll get a kick out of. But those type of experiences, they're just surreal, and, I'll remember them, for the rest of my life. And it's a great industry. I love what you guys are doing. We didn't have cell phones. You guys got your own podcast. You're starting from nothing. You're at a small college. That doesn't mean squat. It's, just follow your dreams, follow your passion. You guys will do really, really well. So I appreciate you, being kind enough to reach out. It's been awesome doing this. I'll help you guys out. You got to have BC on from Shamrock Sports, because he can give you a lot of great stuff that he's doing in Maine, and more importantly, when you do have him on, he will give you the greatest interview story in the history of sports, which is when I interviewed him.
Okay, we're looking forward to that then.
Yeah, but I'm connected to a lot of different people in the business, so anything that I can do to help you guys out, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you so much, Eric. I think I want to take one piece of advice that you gave: follow your passion. That's really what I want people to take out of this interview, because hearing your story, you were so passionate about everything you did, and it led you to have that full circle moment where you literally fulfilled your life's dream to the extent that you could. And that is so awesome to hear about. So thank you for sharing your story with us today. And hopefully we talk to you soon. And if anybody's interested in IdeaQuest, reach out to them. They're a great company. And thank you so much, Eric. And we are looking forward to seeing what you guys do in the future.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on, and keep working hard, and enjoy these days that you have right now, because they don't last forever. You got to come to the real world and join us soon.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right, guys.